Hello, I'm Rachel, and it's time for another week of What's for Dinner. And this week is all about comfort food and getting through that winter rut. On Sunday, we had some family over in the afternoon to celebrate Cameron's 13th birthday. We had pizza, cake, and ice cream, and Cameron is a teenager now, and he does not want everything posted on social media, and I can respect that. Later on Sunday, I made garlic butter chicken, and to get it started, I just put some flour into a zip top bag, and then I seasoned it up with some marjoram, some house seasoning, which is garlic powder, onion powder, and some pepper. And then I also added some salt, some paprika, and some turmeric. Once I had all of my spices in my zip top bag, then I just began placing my washed and trimmed up boneless, skinless chicken thighs inside. I sealed it and gave it a good shake. In the beginning, when I was planning out my menu, I thought I had ordered chicken thighs that had skin on, but I didn't. And so we're just rolling with what we have. I crushed up some garlic, and then my pan was super, super hot, which was not what I wanted. And I tend to forget that cast iron skillets heat up so high. And so I do have my burner turned off at this point, but it's taking a while for that pan to come down to temperature. So I'm going to go ahead and just place my chicken in there and get it extra crispy on each side, and then I will remove it. And I do end up cooking this in batches. There you see I have two pans going, and I just like I said, browned it on both sides, and then I take it out of the pan so I can finish up the sauce, and then I will put all of the chicken back into the pan and then pop it into the oven. So now that I have the drippings from my cooked chicken and some of that flour in the bottom of my pan, it is a lot cooler than it was. It's still pretty hot, but I added some butter to this dish, and I'm just going to melt that down and add my garlic. The flour and the chicken juices will make a really nice sauce. I do end up adding some chicken broth to this just because I felt it needed a little more liquid. It just didn't seem like it produced as much as I expected. So here I'm just putting those pieces of chicken back in, and I did fry it up in two skillets, but put it all back into the one bigger skillet. I just poured the remaining juices from the plate in as well. And like I said, I just added some chicken broth just to give a little more liquid to combine with that flour and butter and garlic, just to give it something to make a sauce, because it just didn't have as much juices from that chicken. And then here is the finished product, and as it sits and cools down, it just gets a little thicker. I just made sure that I scooped it over, and I was cooking this meal with my measuring spoon. Oops. And so I made some corn on the cob to go with it, and some Kraft mac and cheese, and it all seemed like it was the same color, so I put my mac and cheese in a separate bowl. I just kind of hate it when everything on the plate is the same color. And then we are going into Monday with some cube steak. So again, I'm using my cast iron skillet. I put a little oil in it and then added my cube steak. My husband loves cube steak, and it's been a while since I made any for him. I'm using some meat tenderizer because, hey, this is a Monday and I didn't have a lot of time to cook these cube steaks for a long time and get them nice and tender. So I'm using some meat tenderizer to help that process. And I'm just taking a can of cream of mushroom soup. I added a packet of brown gravy mix and just mixed it all together with a fork. And then I added 1 can of French onion soup to that as well, and then mixed it all up. This will be the gravy for the cube steak and also for the mashed potatoes. Now that those cube steaks are browned up on both sides, I just poured the gravy on top and then just let them simmer. And on this night, I just really wasn't in the mood for meat and potatoes, so I decided to have salad with this meal just so that I could amp my salad up a little bit, and then the guys would have a veggie to go with their meat and potatoes. So here is a look at what my salad looked like. There's a little bit of egg, blue cheese, some tomatoes, some avocado. And now we're moving on to Wednesday, and I had forgotten that my son and his family were coming over for dinner. So I came home after work and got the Instant Pot out, got started cooking up the ground beef on the saute mode until it was all browned up, and then I drained off the grease and got to work making some spaghetti. I've never made spaghetti in the Instant Pot. I did follow a recipe, but I was not really happy with the recipe that I used. I will share it so that you know, but it did call for cooking the meat and then adding the spaghetti right on top in a crisscross fashion, and then adding your sauce just enough to cover it. Some of the recipes that I read had mentioned adding some water. So this one did not, and I really think that it needed it because I do go back and add it later. And then when I did open this, I didn't think that the noodles were cooked enough. They were also stuck together. And so I did add a little bit of water and then put them back in for 2 more minutes. And it helped so much. The second time around, everything was just right. So the next time that I make spaghetti in the Instant Pot, I will make sure that I just add the water from the get-go. And to go along with the spaghetti, I just made some garlic bread using a couple loaves of bread that I had made on Sunday. I had made it these frozen bread doughs and just put them in my bread drawer for a later date, and this was the day that it ended up getting used. I had pork stew on the menu for yesterday, and then thought I'd do it today, but we have these ribs already thawed out, so I have to get them cooked, so it's gonna be Instant Pot ribs tonight. So I got these ribs all washed up and trimmed as good as I could, messed around with that membrane and got them all cleaned up. This one had the membrane on it, these did not. So I'm just gonna lay that in there, go wash my hands, come back and season them. This is what I'm using to season these ribs with. Just a little heads up, I did forget to add some liquid to these ribs, so I did get a burn notice. I did have to go back and correct that and start over. Make sure that you add some liquid when you're making ribs. I also used my mandolin and sliced up some potatoes really thin. I did not show that because I am terrified of the mandolin, because I did cut off part of my finger one time. So I didn't want to take any attention away from what I was doing when I was slicing these potatoes. And all I'm doing here is adding them to my cast iron skillet and seasoning them with some seasoning salt and some pepper and garlic. And my thought here was that I would give them a little bit of a head start on the stovetop before putting them in the oven. Oh, by the way, these are going to be cheesy scallop potatoes, or au gratin potatoes. And like I said, I cut them really thin so they would cook quickly, and I just am giving them a little bit of a head start while I have my ribs in the Instant Pot cooking. In my bowl here, I am just mixing up 2 cups of milk and a ½ cup of flour. And I'm just going to pour that right over top of the potatoes now that they are seasoned up and partially cooked. And this will thicken up and be your sauce in the potatoes, I guess. I am going to add a couple of huge handfuls of cheese to this so they get nice and cheesy. I also had some leftover smoked sausage in my refrigerator from a different day, and so I just diced that up really small and put that in there as well. Gonna give it a good mix and get everything mixed together. I do add a little bit more milk because the heat from the stove caused my flour to start setting up already, and you want those potatoes to be covered. So the ribs are done, and yeah, it doesn't take very long in the Instant Pot. So to get them nice and crisp cooked up, I'm going to lay them on a baking sheet and then start saucing them with some Sweet Baby Ray's. I'm just going to squirt it all on each side. I don't show it because that would be a little redundant, but trust me, I sauced both sides, and I'm just taking my brush and spreading it all around, and then I'm going to pop them in the oven until the barbecue sauce gets nice and sticky and caramelized and those ribs get some crispy edges. This is the quickest and easiest way that I know to make ribs. And these ribs are from our pig that we won, our half a pig that we have in the freezer. And they truly are the best tasting ribs. Everything that we've gotten from our pig has just been such a wonderful experience. And then here are the potatoes. We do like them to be crispy burnt on the top, so that was intentional. And here is what they look like on the inside. They turned out perfectly and were the perfect side dish to have with these tender ribs. The meat on these ribs just fell right off of the bone. And so far, every meal that I made during the week was the perfect winter comfort food and really a surprising meal that you could make on a weeknight, like I did on this random Thursday. Now we're moving on to Friday, and surprise, surprise, I just did not feel like cooking, so I declared a sandwich night. I do that sometimes. And here is my little Aldi haul. I did stop at Aldi's on my lunch break earlier in the day and picked up some items so that we could just set them out on the table and everyone can have their own sandwich, chips, pickles, whatever. We were having a couple grandkids over to spend the night, and it was the end of the week for all of us, school, work, the usual. We all do the same thing, right? And so I just wanted an easy day where everyone could kind of help themselves. Plus, with little kids, they would rather snack than eat a fancy meal anyway. I did make sure that we had a variety of different lunch meats and cheeses, some different breads, and, like some pickles, and just set up the chips so that everybody could get whatever they wanted. And here I am making my sandwich. I opted to have chicken salad, which was just pre-made at Aldi's, and I just picked up a loaf of Italian bread. And this is my sandwich, but Ava and I ended up sharing everything else on the plate. We were busy crafting and watching TV together, like movies and playing memory and things like that. So it was nice just to have some snacky type things nearby to just kind of pick at. And I don't usually buy these kind of pickles, but I saw them at Aldi's and thought they would be great if they were leftovers for me to take to lunch. And I don't know if sandwiches and chips are really comfort food, but to me they are. It's a break from cooking, and it just feels good to have something simple sometimes, like sandwiches, chips, and veggies. On Saturday, I decided it was a pot pie kind of day, and so I'm using the sirloin steak that you get from the freezer aisle at Walmart. I have a couple of potatoes that I have washed up and peeled, and I'm going to cut them into small pieces. I wanted them to be small just so that they would cook up super fast, and also so that they would be, bite size inside of the pie. You don't want big, huge pieces. Well, I guess you can do whatever you want. It's your kitchen. But I preferred to have smaller pieces in mine. And then I have a couple of stalks of celery that I'm cutting again into really small pieces because I don't really care for celery too much, but it does give such a good flavor. So I'm making sure that these vegetables get really cooked before they go into our pie by putting them in a cast iron skillet with some oil or butter. I can't remember what I used. Well, there we go, butter. And so I did salt and pepper and garlic powder these so that they have flavor. You don't want to have bland veggies in your pot pie. Once these were cooked a little bit, I just took them out and put them into a separate bowl. I put a little more butter in there, and then I used my piece of frozen meat as utensil and then added it to the skillet and then just began to cook it and chop it up into pieces. Again, I like to season at every level, so I am just using some pepper and some garlic powder on this meat. And it only takes a couple of minutes to get this frozen steak all chopped up and cooked all the way through. And when it's all browned, I just added some flour on top of it and then just kind of mixed it up like you would do sausage gravy or making a roux. Then I added a can of French onion soup and then put the veggies back in with the meat, gave it all a mix, and then added a half can of water just to make a nice sauce. Here is Bill giving it a taste test before it's even finished. I did add some Worcestershire sauce and a half a can of water, like I said, just to make it nice and saucy. I am going to pour all of this into my pie crust, and you want to make sure that you have some liquid in there. I'm using pie crust from the freezer section at the grocery store. These are Pillsbury. There's a 2-pack, so I'm going to use one for the bottom and one for the top. And all I'm doing here is just scooping that filling into my pie crust. I had so much going on here, I didn't think it was going to fit, but I did make it fit after all. I just made sure to pinch the edges together to seal it up really tight. This pie crust did happen to have a couple of slits in it already, so I just worked with those, made sure that there were some vents so that some of that steam could escape. And you could also brush an egg white on top of your pie crust just to make it nice and golden, but I skipped that step, and this is how it turned out. I did cook this pot pie for about 25-30 minutes on 350. Everything about this pie was delicious. The crust was so flaky and the inside was seasoned up and was just so savory and good. Well, that is it for this week's What's for Dinners. That is 6 meals. We did not cook on Tuesday, and everybody just kind of did their own thing. Thank you so much for watching. If you had fun here today, I hope that you'll consider hitting the subscribe button so you can see more of my future videos. I upload a new video every Sunday. See you in the next one. Bye for now.